Jimmy Haslam thought he had his future locked in when Shedeur Sanders signed on, but it's all coming undone. What began with promise and excitement has now unraveled into one of the most chaotic weeks in recent Browns history. Sanders didn't just ask out. He erupted, calling out broken promises and dysfunction in a packed defensive meeting. When Kevin Stefanski couldn't contain his response and walked out mid-confrontation, the power dynamic shifted instantly. Now the story isn't about football, it's about survival.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
What's unfolding in Cleveland is bigger than a quarterback dispute. Sanders' demand shines a harsh light on years of internal missteps, from misguided recruitment tactics to coaching rigidity and absent accountability. While other teams prepare their offers, the Browns face a far harder task, reckoning with a structure that has failed its own star before his rookie season even found its rhythm. This is a story of what happens when potential meets resistance, and resistance finally breaks. This is what a franchise breaking point looks like. The Cleveland Browns, once again, are back in familiar territory, surrounded by chaos, defined by dysfunction, and staring down yet another quarterback disaster of their own making. This time, though, the stakes feel even higher. Because this isn't just a player getting benched or a veteran clashing with the system. This is Shedeur Sanders, a rookie with real star potential, a massive following, and a name that already carries weight, and he wants out. The fallout? Immediate and ugly. During what was supposed to be a routine offensive meeting, things reportedly erupted. Sanders stood up, called out the coaching staff, and made his stance clear. He doesn't trust the people running the team. He feels the promises made during recruitment were never honored. And he's not willing to stay in a system that, in his eyes, is failing him. He issued a blunt ultimatum: trade me or watch this get worse. And what did Kevin Stefanski do? The Browns' head coach, the person responsible for setting the tone, keeping composure, and steering the locker room, had a meltdown. A full-on emotional reaction that escalated to the point where Stefanski stormed out of the meeting entirely. That's not a small moment. That's not a footnote. That's a fracture in the foundation of the franchise. Because when your rookie quarterback openly challenges the team and your head coach responds by walking out, it says everything about where things stand. This isn't tension, it's dysfunction. And it's playing out on full display. Since then, the Browns have entered full-blown crisis mode. Emergency meetings have reportedly been held, with owner Jimmy Haslam involved directly. The organization is trying to manage the narrative, but the damage is already visible. The relationship between Sanders and the coaching staff, especially Stefanski, looks irreparable. And the longer the silence continues, the louder the speculation grows. Let's be clear, this isn't just a clash of personalities. It's a reflection of deeper, systemic issues. Sanders' dissatisfaction isn't based on one decision or a few bad games. It's about how the organization operates. It's about communication breakdowns, coaching rigidity, and promises that, according to Sanders, were never kept. And that kind of breakdown doesn't fix itself overnight. Now, the media has latched onto the story and the fanbase is deeply divided. Some fans are pleading for the team to find a way to mend the relationship, convinced that Sanders is too valuable to lose. Others think he should be traded immediately, arguing that no player, rookie or not, is worth this kind of disruption. But most fans seem to agree on one thing. This whole situation is another embarrassing chapter in the Browns' long history of mismanaging their quarterbacks. And then there's the rest of the NFL. Teams are already circling. The Denver Broncos, Las Vegas Raiders, and Atlanta Falcons are reportedly monitoring the situation closely. They're not just watching out of curiosity, they're preparing offers. They see the writing on the wall. They see a talented quarterback who's alienated from his team, and they're ready to make a move the second Cleveland signals that they're open for business. And if that trade happens? If Sanders gets dealt this early in his career? The impact would be enormous. Because this isn't just a player leaving a team, this is a potential precedent for how modern NFL stars can challenge traditional power structures. Sanders isn't operating like a rookie. He's operating like a player who knows his value. And he's using the tools available to him, social media, public narrative, and brand power, to fight back against a franchise that he believes has failed him. That's why this moment matters so much. This isn't just about a quarterback-coach conflict. It's about how NFL teams handle their most important players in the era of player empowerment. It's about whether organizations are adapting to the modern realities of the league, or clinging to outdated ideas about control and hierarchy. And in this case, the Browns are clearly struggling to adapt. Sanders' willingness to speak up and confront the leadership so directly is a clear signal of how much the NFL has changed. Players aren't waiting quietly anymore. When they feel misused, they say it. When trust breaks, they don't wait around to see if it'll magically return. And when a system feels broken, they're not afraid to put public pressure on the people in charge. The Browns, meanwhile, look like they've been caught off guard. Like they didn't see this coming. Like they expected Sanders to accept his role quietly and fall in line. And now they're scrambling to hold things together, even as everything starts slipping through their fingers. The implications are massive. If Sanders leaves, the Browns once again become the team that can't keep a quarterback. They become the team that fumbled another golden opportunity. The team that couldn't adapt. The team that still, after all these years, hasn't figured out how to build around talent. And that reputation sticks. Free agents will take note. Agents will take note. Rookies in future drafts will take note. And the idea that Cleveland is a place where careers go to stall will only grow stronger. This moment could define how the team is perceived for years to come. And let's talk about Stefanski for a second, because his role in this cannot be minimized. Coaches are supposed to be leaders, especially in moments of pressure. But when things got difficult, Stefanski reportedly reacted emotionally, lost his composure, and walked out. That's not just a leadership failure. That's a signal to the rest of the locker room that even the coach isn't equipped to handle conflict. How do you repair that dynamic? How do you walk back into a room and demand accountability when your own response to pressure was to walk away? Right now, every player on that roster is watching how this is handled. Not just Shedeur Sanders. Not just the quarterbacks. Everyone. Because this isn't just about one guy, it's about what the organization tolerates, how it communicates, and whether it listens when its players speak up. And frankly, that's what makes this situation so alarming. It's not isolated. It's part of a larger pattern that suggests deep-rooted dysfunction at the core of the franchise. The lack of communication. The failure to build trust. The inability to handle confrontation maturely. These aren't just one-time errors, they're signs of an organization that's fundamentally out of sync. And that kind of dysfunction doesn't just impact this season. It impacts the next 5 years. It shapes how you're viewed by players, coaches, and fans. It determines whether your locker room stays together or falls apart. And right now, the Browns are on the edge of a very steep cliff. The worst part? It didn't have to be like this. They had a player with charisma, poise, and enormous upside. A quarterback who wanted to lead. A name with built-in attention and a fan base that believed in him. But instead of empowering him, the organization boxed him in, failed to adapt, and then melted down the moment he called them on it. Now they're in a no-win situation. If they trade him, they look weak and admit failure. If they force him to stay, they risk torpedoing their own locker room chemistry. And if they do nothing, they let the crisis fester and the reputation damage grows worse by the day. It's hard to say which direction they'll take. But what's clear is that whatever happens next will define the Browns' trajectory for years. This is no longer just a quarterback controversy. It's a franchise identity crisis. And if they can't resolve it, and resolve it fast, then the consequences are going to be long-term and brutal. What do you think the Browns should do? Let us know in the comments. Should Shedeur be traded? Can this be salvaged? Or is this just another Browns implosion in a long line of self-inflicted disasters? Hit that like button if you're as stunned as the rest of us. Share this with someone who's been riding this emotional roller coaster since the first meltdown. And make sure you're subscribed because this story isn't ending anytime soon. In fact, it might just be getting started. It's getting harder and harder to find a version of this story that doesn't end in a breakup. Because when a player like Shedeur Sanders goes public, when he's not just frustrated but furious, not just disappointed but done, that's not posturing. That's not a negotiation tactic. That's the kind of thing you do when you've already emotionally checked out and you're just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. And what makes it even worse for the Browns? This isn't a burner account or a cryptic social media post. This was face-to-face, in the building, during a routine offensive meeting that turned into a franchise-defining explosion. Shedeur told the staff to their faces that he wanted out, that he'd had enough. And instead of diffusing the situation, Kevin Stefanski, the supposed leader of the locker room, lost his temper and walked out. Think about how rare that is. Think about how far things have to fall behind the scenes for a head coach to storm out of a meeting with his starting quarterback. That's not just tension. That's dysfunction reaching the surface like lava. You don't walk out on someone you believe in. You don't walk out unless you feel like it's already over. So what now? The silence from the organization is deafening. The Browns haven't released a statement. Stefanski hasn't addressed it. There's no press conference, no media availability to clear the air. Just whispers of emergency meetings behind closed doors, and a locker room caught in the middle of a leadership void. And don't forget, the fans see all of this. So do the analysts, the agents, and every GM with a phone and a trade asset ready to move. Right now, the Browns are in survival mode. Not in terms of wins and losses, but identity. Their reputation is on the line. Their ability to retain and develop talent is in question. Because if you can't keep a player like Shedeur Sanders, if you botch a relationship with one of the most visible, promising young QBs in the league, you don't just lose the player. You lose everything that comes with him. You lose respect. You lose leverage. You lose credibility with every future draft pick who watched this unfold and made a mental note. Don't go to Cleveland. Let's not forget how this all started. Shedeur came into the league with enormous expectations. And with good reason. He's smart, composed, and deeply media aware. He wasn't some fluke or overhyped project. He was ready. The Browns were supposed to be ready too. They made promises. They pitched him a vision. They told him he'd be the centerpiece of a new era, built around his strengths, protected by a flexible coaching staff, supported by a front office ready to evolve. And none of that happened. Instead, Sanders found himself stuck in a rigid system that didn't maximize his skill set, under a coaching staff that refused to budge, and in a culture that still hasn't figured out how to adapt to the realities of the modern NFL. That's the core of this, adaptation, or the lack of it. We're living in an era where players, especially quarterbacks, are more empowered than ever. They have voices. They have followings. They have influence. The old coach says jump model is dead. Today's players want to be part of the process. They want collaboration, communication, and mutual respect. And when they don't get that, they walk. Which is exactly what Shedeur Sanders is threatening to do. And right now, it looks less like a threat and more like a decision that's already been made. The Browns are being tested in a way they haven't seen before. This isn't just about rebuilding a roster or dealing with media pressure. This is about whether they can modernize their identity fast enough to survive. Because if they lose Sanders, and let's be honest, it's looking more and more likely, that loss will define them far more than anything that happens on the field this season. This won't just be a headline. It will be the headline. Because losing a player of this caliber so early, so dramatically, so publicly, it speaks volumes. And the volume is deafening. It says, this is a franchise that doesn't know how to protect its future. It says, leadership is not aligned. It says, the Browns still haven't figured out how to evolve in a league that changes by the week. And then there's the question no one in Cleveland wants to ask out loud, but everyone else is already thinking. What if Shedeur thrives somewhere else? What if he ends up in Denver or Vegas or Atlanta, and becomes the player everyone knew he could be? What happens when he starts winning? When he leads a team that actually supports him? When he shows what he's capable of in a system that adapts to him, rather than asking him to adapt to it? That's the nightmare scenario. Not just because of what it says about Cleveland's past, but what it guarantees about its future. If you're the team that let Shedeur Sanders walk because you couldn't manage your locker room or couldn't listen or couldn't evolve, you're not just a bad franchise. You're that franchise. The one every player avoids. The one that agents whisper about behind closed doors. The one that becomes the cautionary tale at every combine, every draft room, every film session. And right now, that's exactly what the Browns are becoming. It didn't have to be this way. There was a path forward. There was a chance to course correct. And maybe there still is. But it's going to take more than closed-door meetings and vague platitudes. It's going to take accountability. Real accountability. From Stefanski. From the front office. From ownership. They need to acknowledge what this situation really is. A referendum on their leadership. And if they're not willing to change, if they're not willing to meet players like Shedeur where they are, not where the organization wishes they were, then it's over. Not just for this season. For the whole project. Because you only get so many shots in the NFL to prove that you're ready to compete at the highest level. You only get so many chances to show players that you're a place worth committing to. And right now, the Browns are squandering all of it. So what happens next? Do they fire Stefanski? Do they trade Shedeur? Do they try to do both? Or do they keep pretending this can all be solved with a quiet sit-down and a few team-building exercises? Whatever they decide, the clock is ticking. And the longer this drags out, the harder it becomes to repair what's been lost. Trust, loyalty, momentum, reputation, all of it. There's a very specific kind of heartbreak that comes with being a Cleveland Browns fan. You don't just watch your team lose, you watch them implode. Over and over. It's not just the missed kicks, the busted coverages, or the blown fourth-quarter leads. It's the meltdowns. The moments that turn into national talking points. The talent that gets wasted. The hope that turns to ash. And now it's happening again with Shedeur Sanders. But this time it feels different. Because this time, it isn't about a quarterback underperforming. It isn't about off-field scandals or injuries or bad contracts. It's about leadership. Or more accurately, the complete absence of it. A rookie quarterback standing up in a meeting and demanding to be traded is not normal. It's not part of some player development process. It's not a bump in the road. It's a full-on alarm bell, screaming that something is fundamentally broken inside the building. Let's go back to that meeting for a second because the details matter. According to multiple reports, what was supposed to be a standard offensive meeting turned into a confrontation that shattered whatever was left of the team's internal stability. Shedeur laid it all out. His frustration, his distrust, his belief that the organization had failed him. And he didn't dance around it. He gave the team a clear, hard choice. Trade me or it gets worse. That moment alone would be enough to shake a franchise. But then came the real fracture. Kevin Stefanski, head coach, stormed out. Think about that. Your leader. Your culture setter. Your guy. The one person in the room who's supposed to be calm under pressure, the voice of reason, the example for everyone else. He couldn't handle it. He didn't talk it through. He didn't try to de-escalate. He walked out. And with that one move, he told the entire organization that control had slipped through his fingers. You can't come back from that easily. Because once the head coach loses composure, everyone starts looking around. Players start questioning. Staffers start talking. The media starts speculating. And the story stops being about a disagreement, it becomes about a complete failure of leadership. And let's not forget who Shedeur Sanders is. He's not some random rookie trying to carve out a career. He's the most talked about young quarterback in the league. His name carries weight. His social media following is massive. His every move gets covered. And most importantly, he knows exactly how much power he holds in the modern NFL. So when he speaks up, people listen. And when he says he's done, the entire sports world stops and watches what Cleveland does next. And what has Cleveland done? Nothing. No public statement. No press availability. No signs of accountability. Just tight lips and closed-door meetings while the franchise's future burns to the ground. That silence isn't strategy. It's paralysis. Meanwhile, the vultures are circling. The Broncos, the Raiders, the Falcons, teams with holes at quarterback but a functioning leadership structure, are watching this play out and making phone calls. Because the second Shedeur becomes available, they'll be ready. They want this player. And more importantly, they believe they can do better than the Browns did. And honestly, who can argue with that? Let's talk about what Cleveland has done wrong, because this isn't just about one confrontation, it's about a pattern. They promised Shedeur that they'd build around his strengths. That they'd develop an offense suited to his style. That he would be the guy. Instead, they boxed him into a rigid system, refused to adapt, and handed him a coaching staff that prioritized control over collaboration. And when he pushed back, they didn't respond with understanding, they responded with defensiveness. That's not how you build a franchise around a modern star. In today's NFL, the relationship between quarterback and coach is more important than ever. It's a partnership. It requires communication, flexibility, and above all, trust. Once that's gone, it doesn't just come back because someone apologizes or tweets a photo from practice. And right now, that trust is gone. Let's talk next steps. If the Browns trade Shedeur, they admit failure. They admit that, once again, they've taken a high-profile quarterback and driven him out before he ever got a real chance. And that will stick with them. Forever. It becomes part of their brand. Just another chapter in the franchise's long, sad history of quarterback mismanagement. But if they try to keep him, without making real, structural changes? Without addressing the coaching issue? Without doing the one thing they've never done before, listen? Then they'll only make things worse. Because Shedeur Sanders is not going to quietly go along with a system that he believes has betrayed him. He's not going to play nice while the same people who ignored him try to paper over the cracks. And don't forget, the rest of the locker room is watching. Players are already forming their own opinions. And if the Browns handle this the way they've handled past crises, poorly, stubbornly, arrogantly, then the locker room won't just fracture, it will collapse. So where does that leave us? Right here at the edge of disaster. A rookie quarterback with superstar potential wants out. The head coach has lost control. The front office has gone silent. And fans? They're stuck watching the same nightmare play out all over again. It's déjà vu with a fresh coat of pain. But this time it's different. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just another failed Browns quarterback. He's the first to call it out this directly. To stand in the room and say this isn't working and I'm not going to pretend that it is. And that honesty? It cuts deep. Because it forces everyone, from the front office to ownership, to confront the truth they've been avoiding. This organization still isn't ready to win. Not because they lack talent. Not because they lack money or fans or media attention. But because they lack accountability. Because they keep making the same mistakes and hoping for a different outcome. And if they don't learn from this, they deserve every bit of the fallout. The silence from Berea is telling. No statements. No apologies. No press conference to explain how the supposed future of the franchise went from centerpiece to crisis in less than a season. Just whispers, leaks, and the sound of a locker room trying to make sense of the chaos. Shedeur Sanders isn't backing down. He's not softening his stance. He's not working through it internally. He made it plain, the trust is gone. The promises were broken. And if the Browns aren't going to change, he's not going to stay. And Stefanski? Still nowhere to be found. The coach who lost control in front of his own team hasn't publicly addressed it. No ownership of the moment. No leadership. Just absence. The NFL moves fast. If you don't get ahead of a story like this, it owns you. And right now it's owning the Browns. Every day without clarity just reinforces the narrative. This is a team in disarray. A team that still doesn't know how to handle its most important position. A team that can't even hold on to the future when it's handed to them. So what now? Do they finally listen, tear down the walls, and rebuild the culture from the inside out? Or do they do what they always do? Pretend it's fine, hope fans forget, and brace for the next meltdown? You know the drill. Hit like if you're done with the excuses. Drop a comment with your take. Share this with someone still hanging on. And subscribe, because Cleveland's story isn't over. But the ending? It's being written right now.